We're going to talk about friendships today. We're going to talk a little bit about the importance of it, some of the elements of it, and how we can have the power that we need to be great friends for others. In 2009, in The Atlantic, an interview was released with George Vaillant. He was a longtime director of a Harvard study that tracked for 72 years. He wasn't a part of it at the beginning. It started in the 30s. It tracked what really makes human beings happy. And he was asked, hey, what is it that makes humans happy? What have you guys learned? And he said, the only thing that really matters in life are the relationships, are your relationships to other people. Do you believe that's true? Well, I believe it has a significant impact on how our life is going. So we're going to look at a very famous friendship today, David and Jonathan from the scriptures. For those of you who don't know the story, Jonathan was the son of the reigning king, King Saul. But King Saul had gotten a little cray-cray. He'd gone a little nuts. He'd gotten a little wicked. And so God, who installed Saul as king, chose somebody else, chose a man after his own heart, David, who was just a small boy at that time, but who would ultimately grow up and be the next king. Well, this presented problems not only for Saul, but for his son, Jonathan. You could see how that would be awkward if you're the next one in line to be king, but somebody else is chosen by God to be king. But these two became instant friends. Jonathan, even though he was young, he was already a war hero. He once scaled a cliff and then attacked an army, just he and his armor bearer, all by themselves. David, as just a young man, was the only one with the courage to run out to the line and fight. You remember David and Goliath to fight this giant named Goliath. You could see how they have a lot in common. And the day that David slew Goliath was the day that Jonathan and David became great friends. Let's pick it up, 1 Samuel 18. We're going to look at several different scenes in the friendship of Jonathan and David and see what we can learn from it. Verse 1, as soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David. And Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. He was going to keep him around Saul to serve in the king's court. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David and his armor and even his sword and his bow and his belt. You might think that Jonathan is just giving away some of his clothes, but most scholars agree what Jonathan was really doing in this moment was recognizing God has chosen David to be the next king. It's not going to be me. But I believe in the purposes of God. And I think the best use of my gifts, the best use of what's owed to me is to put it in the hands of the future king. I affirm this. I believe this. I love this dude. And I want to partner with what God's doing. Now, Jonathan loved David, but you can see how this would be a difficult thing for King Saul. Over time, King Saul began to grow envious against young David. He began to be suspicious. In fact, he was plotting different ways to kill David. And David slowly begins to tune into this. He goes to Jonathan and tells him about it. And Jonathan's like, what are you talking about? And so Jonathan tries to ascertain from his dad, what is going on? Is this true, Dad? Are you really seeking to put David to death? 1 Samuel 19, let's pick it up there. The next morning, Jonathan spoke with his father about David, saying many good things about him. I love that. I love the way Jonathan is defending David. The king must not sin against his servant David, Jonathan said. He's never done anything to harm you. He has always helped you in any way he could. Have you forgotten about the time he risked his life to kill the Philistine giant and how the Lord brought great victory to all Israel as a result? You were certainly happy about it then. Why should you murder an innocent man like David? There's no reason for it at all. So this time, Saul listened to Jonathan and vowed, as surely as the Lord lives, David will not be killed. Afterward, Jonathan called David and told him what had happened. Then he brought David to Saul, and David served in the court as before. So temporarily, these two have been restored to one another. But Saul's only good for a couple of moments, it seems like. And he continues to simmer and continues to burn with jealousy and anger toward David. And David is once again sensing, this guy, man, I'm a step away from death. Before long, this dude is really going to kill me. And so Jonathan and he develop a plan. They say, well, there's this feast you're supposed to come to and sit at the king's table, David. Do this. Make up some excuse why you're not going to be there, and then we'll see how the king responds. And if he gets really upset about it, we'll know that he really did want to put you to death. But if he figures it's no big deal, we'll know his heart is cool toward you. Well, they have the dinner, and it does come out that Saul is infuriated that David was not there. In fact, he's so mad, he throws a spear at Jonathan. This dude is going nuts, man. His heart has made him so jacked up that he's becoming murderous to the very heir to the throne. So David and Jonathan had worked out a signal. Jonathan would go into the field and have a little play target practice. He'd fire an arrow, and then whatever he said after that to the small boy that was his servant running to get the arrows, that would be code for what David should do. Should he go or should he stay? And Jonathan said, dude, you need to get out of here. So picking it up in chapter 20, 41, as soon as the boy was gone, David came out from where he'd been hiding near the stone pile. Then David bowed 3 times to Jonathan with his face to the ground. Both of them were in tears because now David has to go away. As they embraced each other and said goodbye, especially David. At last, Jonathan said to David, go in peace, for we've sworn loyalty to each other in the Lord's name. The Lord is the witness of a bond between us and our children forever. Then David left, and Jonathan returned home. Well, King Saul continued to pursue and chase David all over the place. And at one moment, when David was particularly discouraged, Jonathan sneaks over into David's camp to where he's hiding. And he does it just to encourage David. In 1 Samuel 23:15, check it out. This is the final interaction between these friends before Jonathan is going to die. He's loyal to David, but he's also going to be loyal to his dad. He's going to follow him into battle at Mount Gilboa, and both father and son are going to lose their lives. Listen to what he says in verse 15. David saw that Saul had come out to seek his life. David was in the wilderness of Ziph at Horesh, and Jonathan, Saul's son, rose and went to David at Horesh and strengthened his hand in God. And he said to him, now listen to what he says, do not fear, for the hand of Saul my father shall not find you. You shall be king over Israel, and I'll be next to you. Saul my father also knows this, and the two of them made a covenant before the Lord. David remained at Horesh, and Jonathan went home. They made a covenant the first day, and then on the last day they made another covenant. If Jonathan hadn't been there, just naturally speaking, who knows what would have become of David? But because of Jonathan's faithful friendship, David made it to where he was supposed to get alive. Is this really important, Carter? It really is important. And this might be hard for you to believe, but we need friends to get through life. We need friends, that's your bottom line, to get through life. And I know that it can be hard. It can be hard not to be cynical sometimes. See, if you've had a few friends that maybe didn't do what you thought they were going to do, or they maybe relationally betrayed you in some way that you were counting on them and they didn't come through, we can grow over time just cynical and just think, well, people are not really going to come through. They're not really going to prove to be your friends. But I want to challenge that thinking today. We need friends to get through life. Proverbs 17:17, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. Friends are essential to get through the adversity that we're going to go through. There's stuff that we may think will hold us together, but it won't. Sex won't get us through the hard times. Similar hobbies aren't going to get us through it. Even some kind of symbiotic relationship where you're effective with someone on your workforce, yes, that's great, but it won't get you through the truly hard times. It's going to take more than that. It's going to take friends. Adversity is coming, as you know, and it's going to be friends that help us to get through it and to experience the love of God. Tim Keller says this about our need for friends. He points out that in Genesis 2, even though everything was perfect in the Garden of Eden, the first thing that God said wasn't perfect was it wasn't good for man to be alone. And you know that doesn't have to be about sex. It doesn't have to be about gender. At the very bottom, what that is most basically about is we need relationships. Even the Garden of Eden isn't enough without friendships. This might be uncomfortable for some, but can you walk with me into the idea for just a second that not having friends, not investing in relationships puts us at a disadvantage, not an advantage? Rabbi Daniel Lapin wrote a book called Thou Shalt Prosper, and in it he gives a very unique perspective on the story of Cain and Abel. You guys remember this story? Cain kills his brother. But this particular rabbi's perspective on this is that when he killed his brother, he depopulated the world because he was greedy to own everything himself. But God comes along and pronounces a judgment on Cain and says, here's what's going to happen because you devalued your brother, because you wanted it all for yourself. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to be a nomad. You're going to be a wanderer for the rest of your life. You're never going to be able to settle down. You're never going to know the blessings and the benefits of community. You're never going to go to the farmer's market. You're never going to be able to partake in any of the blessings and the gifts that I want to put in humankind. You're going to be alone. You're never going to know what the neighborhood is like. You're never going to know what the community is like. You won't experience the advantage of, well, I can get soil from them and flowers from them and mulch from them and I can get a lawnmower over here. You'll never be able to experience all these other benefits that I wanted to bring to you through other people because you've chosen what ultimately produced isolation. And when we choose isolation, it's almost like we're embracing the curse of Cain, and we're cutting ourselves off to all the gifts and all the benefits and all the ways God wants to bless our lives through community and through others. My friends, we need relationships, and they bring significant advantage to us. The Lord, in his mercy, as Cain cried out for reprieve, the Lord brought some mercy and allowed Cain to start a family. And in that family, Cain embraced the ministry of, he'd once tried to depopulate the world, and now he's beginning to populate it. My friends, maybe that's what we need to do. Maybe we've been walking in isolation too long, some of us, and we need to embrace the ministry of repopulating our lives with some of the gifts that God would love to bring to us, but he brings them through other people. I'll tell you, I just want to shoot straight with you. Let's just jump in right now. For some of us, the smartest thing that you could do, even though you might feel rejected, and you might even be doing a little bit of self-rejecting yourself, the smartest thing that we could do is join something like Easy Connect Group or join a small group. Just because if we would find there are other people whom God would use to reach me, to speak to me, to bless me, to bring advantage to my life. Let me give you a few more lightning applications, and then we'll jump into Jonathan and David. It's totally appropriate to ask God for faithful friends to be brought into your life. Jesus knows everything about you and I. He knows our personalities. He knows our likes and dislikes, and he knows where they are. He knows what we need. He knows where we need to be challenged. And sometimes all we need to do is ask, God, would you lead me to the ones who I can be a benefit and an advantage to, and who can be an advantage to me, and give me eyes to see them. The scriptures teach, of course, that those who walk with wise folks will be wise. So we might as well, while we're praying, ask for some particularly wise friends, because those will definitely bring advantage and open up opportunities in our life. But we should also pray that we would see others who need friends, who we can be a wise counselor to. There are people that are lonely, and maybe we are a solution. Maybe we're so busy looking for our solution that we're missing areas we can be a solution. Let's pull this apart. I want to give you just a little construct. I just made it up, but I think there's some truth to it, okay? Let's talk about level 1. This is real casual friendship. This is the kind of friendship where you know about this person. You maybe know their name. You might know some tidbits about their life. You're not really super close. You probably don't interact a ton. You don't know a ton of their secrets. It would definitely be weird for you to kind of engage and hold them accountable about anything because the truth is you haven't built any trust. You kind of automatically get casual friends from everybody. Like, hey, we're just all casual friends. That's good, right? Like, I care if I heard something went wrong, I would be sad about that. But that's probably, on a casual relationship, that's about as far as it goes. This is, from my view, a lot of what Facebook is. I mean, this is just friends that, yep, you want people to like your stuff, but you don't want people to majorly lean in with contrary views to what you think and just, you're probably going to unfriend them before that goes too far. Then we have to decide to go to level 2. So if we're going to level 2, it gets a little bit deeper. We know probably a little bit more. This is, for example, when you're in a group with somebody. If you go to a small group and you've been in group for a couple months, well, now you know some of their stuff. Now you've shared some of your stories. You stopped just talking about facts and you moved on to feelings. And now you're probably even sensitive a little bit to what they like and what they don't like and what sets them off and what makes them feel real good. And there's some interaction, like there's some quality time going on. Like you're around each other enough that your friendship has gone to the next level. You know more about them. You're not casual, now you're closer. So if you think about Jesus, he's got relationships with the tax collectors and the sinners and all those folks. Those are probably level 1 friends. They're not going super deep with them, but then you've got the rest of the disciples, the 11. Those are probably level 2 kinds of friends. Man, they've got time together and they're earning and building trust and they can share on deeper levels. And then there's level 3. This is the David and Jonathan level. This is where I have a commitment to you. We are going through life together. We're not only going to be together, but I will defend you. I'll be the one in your corner. I'm the one who's got your back. I'm the one who cares about your reputation. I'm the one, probably we've got some pretty similar goals. We've got some pretty similar values. And there's even a sense of whatever goes wrong for you, I want to be there because I'm on your team. You winning is me winning from a certain perspective. Now, where we can get a little jacked up, friends, is when we expect a level 2 or 3 with somebody, but we're really only on level 1. And that can be tough in churches, especially because there's a sense of, man, all brothers and sisters, and this is awesome, and this is wonderful, and we're to be together forever in heaven, and that's true. And at the same time, we're asking to be offended almost when we presume that we're on level 3 with everybody, when we haven't made the relational investment to go from level 1 to level 2. So I want to challenge all of us. It's a great idea to just begin to pray that the Lord would form those relationships the way that he wants to, recognizing that nobody owes us anything. Can I be that blunt with everybody? From a friendship perspective, let's just all be real for a second. Nobody owes us anything. And some of us, we just want a friend. I want a friend that is going to love me unconditionally and never try to change me. Can I give you some feedback on that? I think what you want is a dog. That's what dogs do. Yeah, they love you unconditionally, and they're not going to try to change you. But see, the thing is, Jesus is the only real unconditional friend. He's the only perfect friend. He's the only one that always loves you no matter what. And he will try to change us because he loves us, and he will often use our friends. So we need friends to get through life. So what are the components of friendship? What do we learn from David and Jonathan? Here's number 1, common passions. Common passions. These two seem to really, you can see why they get along. They've got some common passions. They're both stirred up and courageous. They both take the fight to the enemy. Jonathan scales the cliff. David runs out to the line to fight the giant, and that's the very day they meet, and they're both like, oh man, you're the other person that's really, really courageous. You're the other person that really, really cares about God's glory. Oh, I love it. We have so much in common. You can see why they were immediately knit together. They cared about the same things. I really believe we need to be asking Jesus to introduce us to friends that have common passions, or even passions that we're about to have. We just haven't learned that we're passionate about it yet. Common passions are a great building block for relationships. And it could not just be passions, it could be you both have similar experiences. It could be, you both had the same kind of childhood thing happen to you. It could be you're both interested in this weird, obscured form of art. But whatever it is, what's so beautiful about friendships is it would begin to ask the question, you too? You like that too? I thought I was the only one. I thought I was the only one that went through that. That's awesome that I get to meet somebody who cares about that too. And see, when you listen to folks whom you've built on some common passions, you realize there's a lot that you have in common, but there's also views where you're very different. And because you love one another and because you're tight together like that, you can become more broad-minded. You're not threatened when there's a difference of perspective. When your friend, your real friend, tells you, hey, I see that a little bit differently. Can I share this with you? That's a good thing. You're like, yes, I would love to hear a different vantage point. I want to become more broad-minded. I want to be a more fully developed disciple of Jesus Christ. I want to be able to see things from different perspectives. I appreciate that about you. That's one of the things I love about you being my friend. I appreciate your unique gifts, your unique individuality. Here's number 2, constancy. Constancy. I don't know why I like that word better than faithfulness. I feel like you want to be faithful. But from my perspective, constancy is what we really need in our friendships. David and Jonathan, they made a covenant, right? And that covenant, that's different than just making a contract. It's different than just an arrangement. It's different than just a handshake. A covenant, here's really what you're saying with a covenant. You're saying, if I fail to meet the obligations of my end of this, I'm inviting God to cut me in half. It's not about what I get. It's about what I'm obligating myself to because I love this person, because I'm so for them that even if it's at great personal cost to me, I want to make sure that I do it. There is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Constancy is different than having a user-end relationship. When we're constant, we're in it no matter what. We're going to do it. A user-end relationship is the relationship I have with Walmart. It's the relationship I have with Starbucks. It's the relationship I have with Netflix. It's the relationship I pretty much have with anything where I buy something. And they're all good with it. They know. The deal is they give me a good product for cheap and I'll buy it. Like, that's the whole deal. It's about me getting the advantage that I can and them getting an advantage from me. That is a user-end relationship. That's not what friendship is about. See, friendship isn't just about networking. It's not about getting around certain people because they can open doors for us. Friendship is about constancy. It's about saying, no matter what happens to you, I'm going to be with you. No matter what happens, I'm for you. It's a lack of cynicism. Has cynicism ever kept you from fully being who you're supposed to be in a relationship? Of fully going there, of fully sacrificially loving? I don't know if it has for you. It has for me. Jonathan strengthened David spiritually. Did you see that in verse 23:16? He encouraged him in God. That's so huge, man. That's covenantal right there. That's constant. Whatever he had to do to get away from his father, he sneaks over to where David is, and he encourages him in the Lord because true friends care about one another spiritually. And he looks him in the eye and he says, David, I know you're low, man. I know this is hard. I know this is a difficult spot you're in, and I care about you, and I care that this is hard. And by the way, listen to me, you man of God. You are going to do this. You are not done. You are going to press on because your God is going to be faithful to you. Don't you give up. Don't you stop here. Don't you dare quit. This is it. You are going to be the king, and you're going to go on. And I'm here to tell you, if nobody's telling you, I'm telling you, your God's going to come through. I'm your friend, and I'm telling you, you believe God. You stay after it. You keep going. And you might say, well, I can't do that to somebody. You're the friend. Who else is going to do it? Who else is going to do it? Isn't that what you need to hear? Doesn't somebody need to say that to you sometimes? So why don't we all put on our Jonathan outfit and go do it for somebody else? Jonathan protected David. Jonathan refused rivalry with David. See, I've seen when people have a lot of same passions, when they're stirred up about a lot of the same things, sometimes that goes a little haywire and gets a little dark, and they become jealous of one another. They begin to compete with one another. But that's not what Jonathan did. That's not what David and Jonathan did. 23:17, do not be afraid, because the hand of Saul, my father, will not find you, and you will be king. You will be king over Israel. You will be king over Israel, and I will be at your side. He says, David, I know right by rights it should come to me, but I care about the things of God, and I care about you. And it doesn't matter what I would get. Here's what's going to happen. I'm not going to compete with you. I'm not going to compete with you. I want you to get everything that's supposed to come to you, and I trust God to get me everything that's supposed to come to me, and it's all going to work out just fine. You can say amen anytime you're ready, 11 o'clock people. We need friends to get through life. Here's number 3, transparency. The soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Most commentators believe that his soul was knit is a motif. It's saying see-through. Jonathan and David were see-through to one another. They were transparent. They were open to one another. They weren't trying to hide anything. They were saying, this is the real me. This is how it really is. This is what I really look like under. This is where I did leave facts behind, and now I'm moving into feelings. I'm wide open to you. And David, when you're having a rough day, I'm not just going to try to send you a sermon. I'm not just going to try to tell you what you need to do. I'm going to put my arms around you and say, go ahead and bleed, brah, because this is really hard. And I'm not just trying to do drive-through surgery on you. I care. It's all right for you to be a little jacked up. It's all right for you to make some mistakes. It's all right for you to not always feel like everything's going right. And see, when we're see-through with people, when we're transparent with people, we get comfortable talking about our flaws. And we get comfortable having somebody talk about ours when we're really going there, when we've really decided to be friends. That's why it says in Hebrews 3:13, but exhort one another every day as long as it's called today, that none of you may be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. Well, check that out first. According to this, the hardening that comes from the deceitfulness of sin is constant and needs an everyday reminder. Well, where's that everyday reminder going to come from? It's going to come from a friend. It's going to come from a friend. And so the scripture advises you need to encourage one another, build one another up, and call out the darkness in one another from time to time. Friends keep us from being deceived by our own sin. Isn't that awesome? Isn't that what Jonathan did with Saul? You see, Jonathan wasn't just a great friend to David. He was a great friend to his old man, to Saul, to the king. He didn't just go against Saul. He constantly challenged him. He said, Dad, what are you doing? This is wrong. This is wicked. This is not the way that you should go. Don't do this. Because he was a friend. He pointed out where deception was taking place. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but deceitful are the kisses of an enemy. Sometimes that looks like encouraging somebody who needs to receive grace. They're being too hard on themselves. And you need to remind them, listen, Jesus knew what he was getting when he got you, all right? And he loves you, and it's okay to make mistakes. But sometimes, as a friend, it involves saying, hey, I love you, and you can do whatever you want, but I'm not sure you and God are done talking about that. You seem to get over that really easy. That seemed kind of like it wasn't a big deal to you, but it seems like as I look at the scriptures, that's a big deal in the scriptures. So I'm just your friend. I'm not the Holy Ghost. I'm not Holy Ghost Jr., but as a friend, I'm just saying, might want to take another look at that. Maybe I'm wrong, but check it out. How do we do this, guys? How do we receive the power to be this kind of a friend? I mean, constant all the time, transparent all the time. How do we do that? From my perspective, that's a hard thing to do. That hasn't always been easy, and I haven't always gotten it right. Jonathan, for us, is a picture of Jesus. He's a picture of the Lord. See, Jonathan is the hero of this story. I don't know if you picked that up yet. We often think of David as the hero. Jonathan is the one. He was faithful and constant to his father. He was faithful and constant to his friend. He took all of his gifts. He took everything that was owed to him, everything that by rights was his, and he lifted it up and he put it in the hands of the king. And he says, it doesn't matter what I think is mine, whatever you want is the right thing. Speaking of the true king, God the king. Listen to what Jesus said on the night before he was murdered. John 15, 13 through 15. Greater love has no one than this, that someone laid down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing, but I call you friends. For all that I've heard from my Father, I've made known to you. From a certain point of view, David was saved through the friendship of Jonathan. You and I are saved through the friendship of Jesus Christ. You see, Jesus has been being a friend to you and I before we ever could conceive of him, even before we were born. Jesus was busy being a true friend, the best of friends. Jesus has a passion that we should have. We sometimes don't know we're supposed to have it. It's a common passion of having our sins forgiven. Jesus has a passion, a burden. He's stirred up about you being in heaven with him forever and not having to pay the consequences of your sin. That's his burning passion. And he's so stirred up about it, he's willing to leave heaven in order to come get you. And Jesus is constant. He's absolutely constant. See, Jesus at any moment, at any time could have said, I'm done, I'm out, that's it. I'm done being on this cross, I'm done carrying this thing. We know Jesus said at any second he could call 10,000 angels to his side and deliver him out of the whole thing. But what held him there was his constancy. He was being a friend to you and to me. You see, God the Son, in eternity past, before he ever came in the form of a baby, he looked at you and he looked at me and he knew everything about us. He knew everything we would ever do wrong, and he was wide open about it. And he looked at us and said, I'm gonna still go. I'm gonna still be a friend. I'm gonna still be faithful. I know what they did, but I'm gonna go and fulfill the Father's will entirely and completely because I love them. And do you know, he was open with you. He didn't hide anything from you. He didn't keep anything from you. He became poor so that you and I could be rich. He took all that was rightfully his and he gave it up for you and I. And as he was displayed there on the cross, he was wide open. He was naked with a hole in his side that you could see right into. He had holes in his hands. And those nails held him open for you. It's Jesus' constancy that allows us to be constant as friends. See, as I realized how faithful he was, when he knew everything about me, he was still faithful and still fulfilled it all. I'm empowered then to say, well, Jesus, if you can do that for me, who has betrayed you way more than anyone has betrayed me, I can do this for others and remain constant. Lord, if you can be open with me and still persevere in love with me, I can still be transparent. I can still be open. I can still take the risk because it's what you would do. Jesus, in his final moments, said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. He said that because he's your friend. He's your friend. Are you looking for a friend? He's right here. And he will empower us to be the kinds of friends that we need to be.